who will present an overview from the academic division.
Thank you, Dr. Fenoy, and good afternoon, board members. It's a pleasure to see you, even if virtually. I want to first start by thanking all of our students, our teachers, our school administrators, district staff that have really come together in our entire community to make our academic virtual education plan roll out so smoothly. Now, we know it's not perfect. We are working through some of the glitches, and we'll continue to do that. And why was this so successful? It was a well-developed plan, as Dr. Fenoy stated, that included with 4 phases. First phase was the readiness phase. In this phase, you'll see is where we surveyed our community on the needs for devices and Wi-Fi access. In addition, we established our instructional framework and what that would look like to prepare our training materials for our teachers and our community members, as well as developing a TV broadcast schedule. On this next slide, you'll see the 3 delivery options that were utilized, that are being utilized for distance learning. The first option is what you're seeing the majority of. This is our teacher-led instruction through Google Classroom, Google Hangouts, such as we're doing here right now. Option 2, I want to do a big shout out to Dr. Sheffield and her entire team around our district-led instruction via a website. Our instructional continuity site houses lessons in every one of the subject areas that we provide in our school district with pre-recorded lessons, as well as a option for parents and students to call in after reviewing these lessons, which leads into option 3, our district-led instruction via the television set. So here, again, recorded lessons provided to our community via the television, as well as office hours for individuals that may have questions on the lessons provided. Our next phase was the deployment. So once it was announced that schools would be closed is when we rolled out everything that occurred in phase 1. So the deployment of our devices through our school sites, our regional sites, our professional development training, and a big shout out to our Trailblazers. As you know, we have over 2,000 Trailblazers who provided additional level of support at the school center around how do you deliver education virtually. We provided training for our principals on a regular basis, and we released the instructional continuity site. On the next slide, you'll see that based on this work, and through our survey, an incredible amount of individuals responding, close to 150,000, we delivered almost 65,000 devices to our community. We continue to work through that process to this day for those individuals who still need a device. In addition, the Wi-Fi needs, we continue to problem solve there with our community that need Wi-Fi, where 10% of the survey respondents identified that need support. On the next slide, you'll see some of the work and pictures of our schools and what they were doing on delivering of these devices. And I want to do a big shout out to our Education Foundation, who has been raising dollars and devices for our community. So through partners such as FPL, Office Depot, and our community buying devices for our community. So thanks for their partners to make this all work. The next slide, you'll see an example of what our professional development on-demand training looks like. So everything from how to set up a Google Classroom, how to do a Google Hangout, and so much more is on demand and able to be provided to our teachers at any time. And let me tell you, they were used. On this next slide, you'll see just how much of that. Google Classrooms between March 23rd and April 17th, over 23,000 were created, bringing up a total of close to 35,000 active Google Classrooms happening right now. Our teachers, close to 2 million posts of work to support our students through these Google Classrooms. In addition, the instructional continuity site that I talked to you that Dr. Sheffield and her team provided has over 100,000 people hitting that site to provide the resources, not just to our teachers, but to our entire community, again, through our portal. And you can see the professional development continues to be utilized throughout our district. Under the teach and monitoring section, this is when everything we just talked about, it went down to the schools and to the teachers, where they actually opened up their classrooms to our our students. In addition, we continue to provide support, training support during this time for our teachers, our parents, with hotlines and other resources during this phase. On the next slide, you'll see an example of our TV broadcast schedule. So again, many of our community members utilizing this as either for a few for core and some for supplemental instruction. And so what we really wanted to do is to be able to monitor and measure all of this work. How would we do that? So thanks to our IT, our ET, our research team provided these dashboards. We opened this up to our board members. A few of you stepped in and got a review of this dashboards. And again, if any others want to take a deeper dive, we'd be happy to show you all that this has to offer. There's a lot of filters here. What I want to orient you to right now is just those two top green bars. So since March 31st to up to yesterday, or actually up to last Friday, we had over 171,000 students access the portal through online education. That results into 98% of our students accessing virtual education. So on a weekly basis, we're looking at about 95%, and then on a daily basis, roughly about an 85%, because we know not every single student is going in on every single day. Now, our key there is to find out those students who, one, have yet to engage, and our principals, our teachers, our counselors are working to make sure that we remove the additional barriers that keep students from accessing virtually on a regular basis. The two bars below, so as we stated earlier, we provided 65,000 devices out to our community. We're able to identify those devices and to find out if they've actually been used for virtual education. And I'm pleased to announce that at a 99.6% rate, they've been utilized for virtual education. So our community is using these devices that were deployed. And to the right are the unique tile access. So you can see the majority of what students are utilizing is Google Classrooms, but we're able to look into every type of platform that we provide. On the next slide, we're able to look at that same information on a daily basis. So again, we're able to filter in by school, by type of usage, by special groups, etc. And on the next slide, we're able to do that, as I said, by school, by every single day, and in addition, able to zero into every single classroom. And then on the back side, what we provide at each of our schools is a list of rosters of students who have yet to engage in virtual education, so that, again, additional tool for them to make sure that we remove those barriers, to make sure that those kids are engaged and stay engaged in online education. And on the next slide, not only are we providing the instructional support to our schools and to our students, but the whole child. Our behavioral and mental health supports continue to be rolled out and provided to our schools. And again, if any community members are in need of support, mental and behavioral health support, these are some phone numbers that you can call and we'll get support to you immediately. And finally, our last phase is the recovery phase. This is where we're beginning to engage in, once we get through this pandemic, what does it look like when we come out of this? What does summer look like? What does next school year look like? So we're beginning to have those conversations at this time. So at this time, I'll take any questions that the board members may have.
Mrs. Whitfield?
Thank you. I was just curious about the slide where you had individual school information. You had, what the percentage was for each school. Is there any way we can see that so we can understand how our individual schools are doing in our communities?
Absolutely. So we can, Ms. Whitfield, after the board meeting, we'll set up a time to sit with you. We provide this information in a board response that we can go through and show you all of the different filters.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mrs. Anders, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, I'd like to thank Mark Howard for actually showing me the demonstration of the dashboard. And as you look at the dashboard, you see that, our scores are high, but as you kind of zero in at some other schools, especially in the Glades region, I saw the numbers were not as positive as they should be, with a lot of the children not having access, making access to the computer. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is, how did it go? Every child got a computer, but if you had 5 kids at one school, a parent had 5 kids, could be more at one particular school. Is that all that they had, was one computer? And how are we trying to work that through to make sure that all of the children, if you have maybe 6 kids in a home from one school, how are we working with that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ms. Andrews. We do have that situation come up more often than not. So if a family had a student in every level at elementary, middle, and high, they got 3 devices. If they had multiple children in one level, such as 3 or 4 children in elementary, we use that 2-to-1 ratio. So we would give 2 devices. For 2 students, we gave a device. So with 3 students, they received 2 devices. And then families that still needed additional support, we're working through that through the principals and the regional offices to provide that additional support.
And just to follow up, Mr. Barbieri.
Go ahead, Ms. Sanders.
With those children, we now know that a lot of children still have not received the devices. How have we structured to make sure that each of those homes are actually going to get the devices? Some of the parents didn't fill the surveys out. Some just didn't even know about the surveys. And we recognize from looking at the data from Mark Howard that a lot of children have not signed in. So what are we doing?
So if a family still is in need of a device, they should contact their school principal. The school principal then creates a ticket that goes to the regional office and to our IT department for delivery. And we're continuing to do that as of today. So again, parents, if you're in need of a device, contact your principal and they'll create that ticket.
Ms. Sanders, your microphone's off.
Will there be someone that could deliver a device to a home that can't pick up?
We'll work on that. If that's the situation, absolutely, we'll work through that process.
Okay.
Ms. Brill? Then after Ms. Brill, Ms. Whitfield.
Thank you. So first, I'd like to also request the opportunity to see how my schools are doing. So that's a request for you, Mr. Oswald. My second question, though, is the communities that are not wired for Wi-Fi, some of them also do not have cable television. What are we doing to assist in those communities?
So if they still don't have Wi-Fi, so we're partnering with Comcast and T-Mobile, who will provide free Wi-Fi access. If that's still a barrier, even if they don't have cable, they're able to watch with just the old-fashioned rabbit ears through one of our channels. And I have to find out what channel that is, but we'll push that out, even with just the rabbit ears. But again, if those families could reach out to their principal so we can begin to help remove those barriers for those families.
Go ahead, Ms. Brill, finish, and then after you, Mrs. Whitfield, and then Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. And my concern, I did point out one community, but there are some communities where the families are afraid to reach out because some of them are undocumented. They don't have the same access. Is there any way for anybody to assist them? Or I'm just worried about what those numbers are, and if we can find out, if we know which communities do not have the wiring for the Wi-Fi. Comcast delivered kits to some of them, but they don't have the infrastructure. And, what are we doing if they don't have television? I know we were told that they can also do it through their cell phones, but, a lot of those parents also are essential workers and they are not home to assist their children with that. So my basic question is, can we capture what those numbers are and have some type of plan for them?
Yeah, so channel 12 is the station for those who don't have cable. For those families, there is a hotline that families can call where they don't have to be identified if they're concerned about that we could potentially talk through and work through their particular challenge. In addition, our schools every single day are working with those students who are not engaged, so we're able to measure that and trying to problem solve for additional support that is needed. So our schools have that list, they're working through it. And if there continues, please have them reach out to us centrally so that we can provide them that support.
Go ahead, Mrs. Whitfield.
So the couple of schools in my neighborhood have been on the very low list as well. And one of the things that the principals are doing there, even beyond the TV, is either phone call conversations with the students that can't get on to try to teach them, or they've even been putting together packets and getting those packets out to the students. I was wondering, are you capturing that data at all so we know if a student is completely not been responsive, or if they are getting some sort of education still, just so we can understand, the difference in the numbers?
Yeah, our principals and our regional offices, so our regional instructional superintendents, are capturing that data. We just don't have it at aggregate yet at the district level. So yes, so they're zeroing into every family and providing, as you stated, going well above and beyond too, where teachers are actually calling students, providing instruction on the phone. We provided packets earlier on to families as well. So again, we do have that data that we provide as a follow-up later.
But you do have it, so you'll actually be able to put that together one day so we can see how the numbers are, not just from the internet access?
Yes, we're working through that and how we define what that looks like. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dr. Robinson and then Mrs. McQuinn.
Okay, thank you. So first, this whole thing is bugging me out. But all right, so to stay on point, first, I think our staff really did a heroic job of turning on a dime to go to this distance learning. From some of the conference calls I've been on with Council of Great City Schools, I know that there was at least one school district that basically did a pause for several weeks, and they're just now going to distance learning. So I think that was a heroic effort. I especially also want to thank Mark Howard and his team for that distance learning dashboard and for having the foresight to share it with the public so that community-based people who are trying to help can look and see what the log-on rate is like for the community they're trying to help. I also want to acknowledge the principals that also did their own continued form of heroism. And I probably shouldn't do this, but to especially shout out Katrina Granger at Bethune Elementary. The numbers for log on for Bethune were pretty low. After I saw that, I called her and said, how can I help? Mrs. Granger, true to form, has actually been knocking on doors and delivering packets herself. I don't know that we're capturing that data, but I just want to thank everybody for their efforts. I do think that now, hopefully, is the time that we can take a deep breath and refocus. And I've had this conversation with some, but I think it's appropriate to put it out there. What are we doing to essentially narrow the curriculum for the rest of the school year so that teachers and families can focus on the most essential elements? And then the second point I want to make at this point is, in terms of access, I'm becoming increasingly aware of neighborhoods that by virtue of their infrastructure cannot get internet. And so it's not so much about the family's income, but by virtue of the infrastructure in the community. And I shared some of that information today. But I think as we do this, whatever we call that recovery phase, as we look forward, I think we have to put on the table, and I think it's appropriate for the school district to do it and pull in partners, broadband. And interestingly enough, I had a conversation with former school board member Jody Gleason today, because for those of you who were around, she, through the Education Commission many years ago, 15 years ago or so, tried to do countywide broadband using the underground fiber. I might not be using the right words, that already exists. That effort led to internet being available in Pleasant City. I think that there's some place in the Glades that at least it was available. I don't know if it's still operational, but this internet access problem is at a fever pitch now because of this situation, but it's a long-standing problem. And so I think it's really time for us to put it on the table, pull in our partners, not only with the county, but with the medical community, who is now having to switch and really use telemedicine, and with other facets of the community to figure out how do we work together to get broadband internet access for all of our communities. And with that, I'll be quiet for a little bit. But I would like a response from staff about the narrowing of the curriculum. I think it's critically important.
So thank you, Dr. Robinson, and I want to thank you for your feedback on that piece. We do have work groups, both at the regional office and at the central office, that are working to identify those critical standards that have the strongest ROI, as well as skills and in parent-friendly language to be able to be pushed out in the very near future. So thank you for that.
Mr. Chairman, if you would give me a minute, please. I'd like to extend that offer to all board members. What Mr. Tierney and his team have set up, Kathy V is running it. We have a series of work groups, so we're extending sort of our brain power, extending down to regional offices, bringing in principals to work on different future programming issues. And so Dr. Robinson brought up this narrowing of the curriculum, I think in our one-on-one last week. And so we were able to put that on the list, and then Keith was able to assign that to a work group. So as different things bubble up in your communities, please let me know, or Mr. Tierney, or any of the chiefs, and we will put that on our work group protocol moving forward. Thank you.
Ms. McQuinn?
Thank you. This is not my comment, but going to the narrowing of the curriculum, I know that my neighborhood has several families with secondary, but also many elementary school children. And for example, one family has a kindergarten student, a fourth grade student, and then the ninth grade student who's Jupiter High going well. Typically our secondary students can advocate a little bit for themselves, but for example, the one who has she has the two elementary, one fine on grade level, the other kindergarten who has some learning disabilities, just trying to do the assignments, for example, cut and paste, compound words. This is a family who is very, very appreciative of the school board's efforts, but very overwhelmed also by doing their own in-home jobs and then supervising 3 children, one of whom does have learning disabilities, and it's overwhelming for them. So the narrowing of the curriculum, I would say just more specific to elementary, but not necessarily. So I just know that our high school kids are usually better at speaking up for themselves. To my specific question, on Monday night, I had a virtual meeting with the AACY, American Association of Caregivers. They are responsible, remember, for some family members who rely on these students to take care of them physically, in addition to going to school. And at that meeting, and by the way, they have 67 graduating seniors in that group, and I've sent them the information because they just don't always get the information. But family therapists from AACY who are going into, I'm moving specifically to the elementary level, the family therapists are helping the families call the school, and I'm assuming, remember, I'm always defending principals, but they're calling the school and they're being told by a principal that they have no more computers. Now, so my question, follow up to that, so clearly this student has not been receiving instruction. Are the principals giving you, the regional superintendent, students' names of any student who has not checked in? And I know you addressed that, but specific to the student, have they done that?
So we have a whole protocol that's in place through the regional offices and the principals where they route that ticket. Once the principal verifies that the student is in need of that device, the regional offices then deploys that to the IT department for deployment of the device. So, Ms. McQuinn, perhaps we can talk offline after for which school, but we'll definitely follow up with the regional superintendents, and they are listening to this broadcast. So we'll be sure that the message is clear with our schools and those families that are in need. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And a follow-up to the AACY question. Again, these were two that came out. There is a family who cannot even get cable because the mom owes money. So are we going to penalize the student who at least somebody in that household is one of our students and is a caregiver? We're penalizing that student. They cannot access anything. How are we handling that?
So we do have that 12-2 station that is available for those families as well. And in those particular situations, our schools, no, we're not looking to penalize any student because of this situation. We're looking to work with the family and to problem solve the challenges that they face. So that means some other outside the box delivery of instruction, that's what we're working through. So if no one has to decide or contact that family, Ms. Quinn, if you could please, and if any other families out there that you have not talked to anyone, please reach out to your school principal or to the regional offices so that we can work through those challenges and help support you.
Okay, and I'm going to make sure that you get the specific names because the fact that the principal can't do anything about the fact that they haven't paid their cable bill, so they don't have a television. So, and believe me, I know out of 190,000 plus students that two families, obviously we're doing an incredible job, but we don't want to lose any of them. So I'm just going to get the names directly to your department and then you get them to wherever.
And we have done, as far as calls, we've actually called Comcast on behalf of certain families to help in situations like that. So I thank you as well for this.
Thanks.
Right. Mr. Shaw, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you. This is for Mr. Oswald. A couple issues that are beyond this, but we're looking at the close of the school year. Can you give us an update on the issues of retention and summer school? Because I get a few questions that are being asked related to that. And when will specific information be out? And specifically, I heard from one assistant principal who was scheduled to be a summer school principal at another school. And that would mean that as kids come into to that summer school, these teachers and those APs would have no idea who these kids are because they aren't their students from during the regular year. So what kind of discussions have y'all had related to that issue?
Yes. So first on promotion retention. So there's been a lot of discussion around that on that particular issue. Our governor did come out and talk about grade 3 students that they will be promoted, that the FSA test does not, the fact that they didn't take it, they will be promoted. And for our seniors, for Algebra 1 end of course exam and the English language arts exam, that those are waived. They just need to complete their credits for graduation. So we're working through those particular grade levels. Outside of that, our principals and our teachers are working with any of the families that there may be concerned with to provide additional support. So again, our principals and the teachers are doing that as we speak to problem solve. Direction from the Department of Education is that we work through our student progression plan regarding those type of decisions. We do have a week from today at our board meeting some recommendations that you'll take action on, such as the waiving the credit community service hours for our seniors, which is a local decision, those 20 hours, and some other areas. As far as when we look forward to summer school and beyond, Dr. Fenoy has directed us, and we are currently in process of planning what does summer school look like under certain conditions. So if we're still in a stay-home mode, what does extended learning opportunities look like versus if we're able to relax some of that. Dr. Sheffield is working with a team right now, with her team, to design some of those recommendations to move forward in the very near future.
Mr. Shaw, you had a follow-up? No?
Yes, just a quick, Keith, on the issue of students who parents have a real strong feeling about retention, that they would like to see a student retained. Is there any state guidance that's come on that, or is that an individual district decision?
Yeah, so that's a local decision based on the direction of the Department of Education, but we to work closely with our families and to sit down with them to discuss the pros and cons. And so what we've directed through our regional offices and with our principals is if a family is requesting a retention, to sit down and let's look at the data. What does the data say about this particular student? What are the pros and cons of a retention? Our student progression plan does state if a student does meet all the requirements instructionally that they would be promoted. So those are conversations. Again, each case is very unique, and we want our principals and our teachers to have those conversations with each individual family and take those up case by case.
Mr. Manuel, would you like to give us a student's perspective on how the distance learning is going for a senior?
So from a senior's perspective, it hasn't been too difficult because I am familiar with Google Classroom, and most of my school in general is because our teachers have used it in the past. But if there's anything to say about the distance learning, it's almost like I've gotten more work now than I would have in school. And it might be because they're trying to make up for instructional time and then also adding on to what we would do at home. But it's been fairly simple, fairly easy to keep up with my work, and it's keeping me busy too, so I'm not bored at home doing nothing. So yeah.
Good, thank you. Dr. Robinson, go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to circle back. Can you hear me okay? Because I switched to a microphone. Okay, I'm assuming you hear me. So I want to circle back on what I call the narrowing of the curriculum. This whole pandemic has shown, I think, everybody how, as a society, we fail to meet the needs of the least of us, those of us who have fewer blessings. And so if we're talking about education, then we have to know that in addition to the summer slide, in addition to those whose needs we were not meeting, in addition to those who we were not connecting with, that we're going to have a COVID-19 slide. I can't imagine that more than, maybe 20% of the students are engaged to the level that they would have been engaged if they were in the bricks and mortar classroom with a live teacher. And I think that we have to acknowledge that despite all the central office efforts, this is just, humanity, right? So when I say narrowing of the curriculum, since for the most part, by the time we reach March 13th, most of the standards should have been covered. We were about to enter into the testing phase. That we should use this period, and my vote would be that we do it over the summer as well, as a review of the most important things that a student should know and be able to do at any grade level. Because what I'm hearing from parents is that their students are getting lots and lots of work. I don't know if it's as stated that it's to try to make up for loss of instructional time, but they're being overloaded. And the parents, and again, to Mrs. McQuinn's point, it appears this is much more elementary phenomenon, but the parents are completely overloaded trying to support their students. I think that we need to make a list of the essentials for each grade in each subject in each grade, and give that to the teachers to focus on. And we can also give that to parents and community partners. So between now and whatever time we get back to whatever the new normal is going to be, people can work on with the students on the most important things. Because otherwise, I think parents are still going to be overloaded, and the students are not going to review the things that they really, really need. And so I just want to make sure that all of the board members understood what I meant when I said narrowing of the curriculum is really a review of the most important elements. And I would hope that we could do this expeditiously. Like, I get the work group, I get we have processes to go through, but work groups take way too long, and we need to start providing parents and teachers with the most important things list as soon as possible. And the educators know what those things are. We just simply need to write them down, and everybody make the sign of the cross and move on.
Ms. Brill, then Mrs. Andrews. Ms. Brill first, then Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And I'd like to return to the question of pupil grade retention. I did have an extensive conversation with Mr. Oswald and with Ms. Rico today regarding that. I actually also submitted a question online for non-agenda questions. And those child study team meetings are happening. They're happening already. And so I would ask the superintendent to implore the principals to look beyond just the data for pupil progression, because there are other factors, social emotional learning. It's an incredibly stressful time for these students. Some of them just are so overwhelmed, the families are overwhelmed. So while they might be meeting what we would call our typical pupil progression goals, the families know their children better than anyone else. And so I would just ask that we have an open mind and not be rigid. And I did discuss with Mr. Oswald having an appeals process through the area offices, which, I want to bring up here too, because there are some principals that are very rigid and sticklers for following policy exactly. And if our policy says they meet pupil progression, then they can't be retained. Some of these families know that their child needs to be. And for my district, it's mostly the really young ones. It's the kindergartners and the first graders that I'm hearing from the most, where the parents feel that they are not mature enough to progress, where the children are not getting it online, and they see that. So to the superintendent, I hope you can get that message out quickly. I hope you will agree that we need to lead with our hearts as well as our minds. Thank you.
Mrs. Andrews.
Thank you. And I want to make sure I thank Mr. Oswald, Dr. Sheffield for excellent work. Very good. I've been following you all and what you're doing. I want to thank also Angela Moore and Dr. McTeer for doing a video Google with me on just the dashboard itself. But two questions at this time. One is we have some teachers who are having difficulty with this technology. And I know that everything's online now. We don't have a whole lot of trailblazers in certain areas of the district. How can some of the teachers get some training on these processes that we're doing? They're struggling and they're asking each other, but it's an online process. Is there an opportunity for the teachers to get some additional training?
Yes, absolutely. Training is available 24/7, literally. So there's on-demand training through our instructional continuity site that holds all of the virtual training. We can do one-on-one training with teachers through Adam Miller's shop, who has a number of staff members to reach out. There's a hotline that teachers can call for support if they're running into any particular issues. So please, that teacher should just reach out either to the principal, to Adam Miller, and we'll provide that support immediately.
And just this last question, some of the parents are concerned because teachers have different schedules each day. Some days they're actually doing direct delivery. Some days it may be something else. And sometimes parents are seeing that children may not have anything going on. How do parents really know what the expectations are each day for their child?
So our teachers, one through our teachers and second through our school principals. So many of our school principals are providing messages out to their community to let them know what we're experiencing. In addition, our teachers are letting those students know what they're responsible throughout the week. If parents have additional needs or support, they should reach out to the classroom teacher or to the school administrators at that particular school if they're in need of additional support. And also on that last question, Ms. Andrews, when I say reach out to Abby Miller, that's regarding a technical support. If it's a instructional support, Dinah Fetterman, her team has support there as well, around instructional resources, and whatever the needs are for professional development for those teachers, we have it available.
Sorry, I had to wait for my microphone to come back on. Was there anybody else that I missed? I see no hands. All right, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Mr. Superintendent?
Ms. Paul will now take over. She's our Chief Operating Officer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board Chair Barbieri, board members, and Superintendent Fenoy. I wanted to give you a brief update of our operations division and what we've basically been doing since school ended. Next slide. So we had a successful ramp up of community feeding, something that just blows the mind, 1 million meals served since the close of school. Actually, it's over 1 million meals served. So outstanding result from our team. Currently serving 20,000 children per day, more than 43,000 boxes of food provided to families, in our great partnerships with Feeding South Florida, PAN Florida, First United Methodist Church, Jupiter Tequesta, and Jupiter First Church. An average number of 217 employees working each week to prepare meals at 35 sites, and we're in the process of expanding sites for summer feeding. And in order to minimize employee exposure, we're going to move to feeding 1 day per week, starting in May. We'll be sure to provide that information on our district website, and we'll be serving multiple meals at that time. Next slide. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. The next slide deals with our maintenance and plant operations. We initially mobilized our custodians to perform a thorough cleaning of our schools. All our schools have been sanitized and re-sanitized in some cases, and we're doing that as needed. We started our AC to be